All right, theology nerds, this is Tripp.
This is Bo.
This is a Theology Nerd Throwdown.
Old school style.
Oh, in the Redondo Beach headquarters.
We're reading letters today.
Oh,
we
got
get letters. We get letters. We get lots and lots of letters.
Woo! And the thing is, people send us these long emails and letters and such.
That is true, which
And
we appreciate.
We do. And I usually try
Love
to talk
feedback.
them into calling into the podcast hotline.
You prefer the speak pipe.
Well, I do because...
You can collect them.
And then it's someone else's voice.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been collecting them. I noticed some of them didn't call in the speak pipe, and they were just really good. And I thought, these are long.
So
letters.
Tripp has printed out the emails, and we actually got one in the snail mail.
Yeah,
That's old school.
at my church.
Yeah. So he printed them out, and we're going to interact black and white with some text.
Yeah, and but because if you hear their voice on the speak pipe, they get to add their own inflection. But if I read it,
Plus, sometimes we get to hear really cool accents.
exactly.
Some from like Scotland,
Yeah.
or
Shane.
yeah, we've even got some
Shane
from
Galloway with his nice
the
southern
southern,
accent,
yeah.
the twang.
We have Australian accents sometimes, which I like. We get calls from Asia, and my favorites are from the Eastern Europeans. Those are some great accents, man.
Theology Nerd Throwdown, where we talk about whatever it is you want to talk about in a nerdy, theology-filled style.
So for those of you who don't know, and I know we've picked up some new listeners recently, so this is the stream, not like the Homebrewed Christianity stream where we interview authors and thinkers and we kind of give them the platform. We just kind of throw out some softballs and let them swing for the fences. This is where Tripp and I sit in his garage, and we, as PhD students who love this stuff, read it all the time, love listening to people's ideas. Sometimes we even get to preach it a little bit.
And we're also ministers.
We're both
too.
ministers, yeah.
So a lot of our listeners appreciate it, and there are some that don't. I'm sure we're going to get around to them today.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So we're going to respond to some of these letters. I'm going to leave out the names
Okay.
just in case
Yeah.
it matters.
That seems fair. First of all, Tripp.
Oh, what?
Congratulations, man.
Oh, yeah.
Cora Fuller
Cora.
has made her appearance in the world,
Cora Lane Fuller. There you
and
go.
she is a cutie.
I know. I've not got it. I've been asking what I'm allowed to share and not share, and Alicia's thinking she's going to let me share more.
Okay.
So once I get official word of what I can share,
the green light.
then we'll actually do a little segment because our first child, Elgin, was a C-section, and it was very
Normally.
different. And this one, Cora, was a VBAC, so a vaginal birth after cesarean, and there's a whole ordeal getting up to even getting pregnant and everything through to be able to have the
Right
birth
till that final day.
and it was a completely magical and amazing experience.
Oh,
so
I'm glad to hear that.
I'd love to
And
talk about it once I know what I'm
that's
allowed to say
fantastic.
and not say.
I also want you to know that you're not just the proud papa of two little kids, but that you are, kind of the godfather of the podcast. And to your credit, when Khaled and I were out in Baltimore in your stead, we got to sit down with Jack Caputo and 4 amazing papers. And the podcast, even without you, did you proud.
I know, but I didn't get a cool nickname, Bo.
I did.
I know.
Guess what Jack called me?
Well, I know, but go ahead and tell
The
me.
Big Other. He called me the Big Other because I was kind of running things and, my typical way of moderating and making sure we stayed on track. And at one point, he said, do we have to do Q&A? And I said to him, just in his ear, I said, Jack, you do your thing. You respond to these papers. I'll take care of everything else. And then he said into the microphone, well, you are the Big Other. And I thought it was great because if people don't know, my name is spelled B-O. That's on my birth certificate.
Because people are worried. They were like, how exactly do you spell Bo?
Yeah. Well, that happens a lot, actually.
Really?
Oh, my gosh.
What's an alternative spelling of Bo?
B-E-A-U. It's like the French for boyfriend, I think.
Ooh.
But you know what I usually do to people? I say, well, on my birth certificate, it's a little bit longer. I do this to the kids in my youth group, and they're like, what's it on your birth certificate? And I just spell B-O-O-M. And as they're calculating it out, I lunge at them, and I say in my loudest voice, boom! And to scare the poop out of them. It's a funny little joke. But anyway, so it's B-O, and so now it stands for Big Other. I'm
That's
pretty
good.
happy about that.
That's good.
I'm trying to get the Twitter handle, so let's start a little campaign for that person who, by the way, hasn't tweeted since 2008, has only done 2 tweets ever with that account. I think that they should
Release it.
Yeah, and because I would love to have the Big Other, and then what I would do is I would share it with other people, and it would be like we would watch over in that kind of collective conscience way. We would watch over and police Twitter. What do you think?
I think that is funny. All right, so letter number 1. Hey, fellas. I got to say, I don't remember how I came across your show, but I absolutely love it. I love the energy, the positivity, the nerdiness, and I love that you can express beliefs that I can relate to without sounding too cynical and snarky. Well done. I haven't emailed before, but I got multiple questions. You'll have to forgive me. First, a comment. I haven't donated yet, but as Christmas nears, I plan to use the Amazon link on your site as much as I can. Please advise the rest of the deacons to do so as much as possible so we can keep getting great content. Oh.
It's a great idea.
That's right.
He clearly has picked up the expectation of supporting the show that he enjoys so much.
Second, I'm sad to say that my study of the Bible has always been sporadic, and I've got loads of poor excuses for it. As a kid, I thought it was boring and figured catechism was enough. Now I don't know enough about which parts to take as true, and I know how dangerous it can be to take things out of the proper context, which lead me to question, are there any Bible commentaries out there that are more progressive-leaning, that would put books and stories in proper historical and literary context? Could you recommend some? I'm planning on asking for one for Christmas.
Oh, good idea. So the 2 things that come to mind immediately is if you're looking at specifically the Old Testament, and I know there's tons of books called How to Read the Bible. This is not an originally titled book, but look for the one, and we can link to it in the show notes here, is it Kugel? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
That is a fantastic take. I really like that one. And the other one is there's a Chalice series written by progressives, and my favorite one is in the Revelation.
Oh, yeah, Farmer's book.
Yeah.
And John Cobb did the
Romans
commentary. A good Marcus Borg's 1-volume book that he wrote for the Introduction to the Bible class in college is a really good one. The Taking the Bible Seriously but Not Literally. The N.T. Wright series. The Everyone series is pretty cool.
Fantastic. I would start with Mark if you want to. The Mark for Everybody or Mark for Everyone is so good.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's lots of pretty cool books out there. I think my favorite commentary is Terrence Fretheim's Exodus commentary. So
there's lots of good options. We will link to all of those. So if you didn't get a chance to write those down, just look at the show notes. There'll be links there.
All right. Third is a personal issue I have. I'm from Michigan, and I moved to Jackson.
I'm sorry to hear that. By the way, Ohio State and Michigan are playing right now, and I'm sacrificing not watching that game to be here. So I just want to say, sorry, Michigan.
I moved to Jacksonville after college because it's just too damn cold there. Unfortunately, I moved. I didn't realize where the red counties and blue counties were in Florida. I feel very strongly about social justice issues, and even within our church small group, we're very outnumbered by conservatives. Don't get me wrong. The people in our small group are amazing people, and we just tend to stay away from hot-button issues in our discussions, but their core beliefs tend to line up better with our church than mine do. To put it another way, if the leadership in your church is racist, that's awful and easy to argue against. If there's somewhat unspoken discrimination sentiment against homosexuals, how do you handle that as a church member in the South? There was a vote in 2012 in Jacksonville in our city council regarding whether to add homosexuality to a list of things like gender, race, etc., that you may not discriminate against. The city council ended up voting against adding homosexuality to the list, and the strongest advocates against the measure were church leaders. And he goes on to say that, he has 2 kids, and I don't have time to look for new churches again. And so I wonder if you have recommendations, or what do you do to find a church that's right for me, where these kind of justice issues are important and central to the church, and not things you join a church and then find out later that they aren't, on board. I just want you to know that you are not alone. You're not the only person. I get 2 or 3 emails of, can I just find a church?
Often.
And I completely understand as a parent what it's like to go, I don't want to be at a church 3 months and then find this out, because I have kids. I want them to be at a church that shares justice values with me, but also want them to get to know the kids and have fun and all that kind of stuff.
So here's a couple thoughts. Now, you're going to have to speak Tripp to the Southern thing. I have no point of reference for that, but here's a couple things I can just say. Number one, we live in a time where we're in Web 2.0, so like in Facebook, where the users are in control of some of the content, but there is still a place for Web 1.0, which is both at our church and in all the other pastors I talk to. No one, not a single person, has come to the church without visiting the website first. So part of the trick is knowing what to Google. So when you're looking for churches in your town, there's a couple key words, right, that you can put that might help. But the biggest thing is, and I found this out, one of the litmus tests, kind of a code word, is if everyone is welcome. So if they say something about how everyone is welcome, that's probably a good start, because most churches that say that mean, right, that they're reconciling, that there's a concern about this issue. Some churches will say everyone's welcome, but they don't mean it the same way. They mean you can come, but you'll have to change. But that's a minority. So as you're looking in Google and you're looking through churches' websites, that's a great way to kind of comb through before taking the time to visit. Because church shopping is really tough. Looking for a new community, we talk to people all the time, and it is, especially with kids, it is a really challenging endeavor. And, if it takes 4 or 5 weeks, that can be taxing on kids every week to show up at a different place, not knowing if that's going to be right.
Other thing is email them. I would just come up with a generic email that's just like, I love Jesus and I have a family. We want to go to a church where you like Jesus, our gay brothers and sisters, the planet, the poor.
They'll let you know right away.
Is this a place I should come check out? And the ministers that reply back with some enthusiasm, then I think you could visit those.
The other thing is, I just want to acknowledge how difficult it is. And I just had a conversation with a good friend of mine this week who is, this happens every week, is somebody really loves the people that they're with. And as long as they stay away from certain issues, they're fine. And they feel really connected to that community. But let's be honest, especially in this age of disconnection and virtual reality, being involved with a community of people is really important. And if there's certain things you just can't bring up, there's something that's going to be unsatisfying about that, because of all places you want to be where you can really bring your full self, you want it to be your church community. Yeah. So the expectations are high.
Yeah, and I think the question about kids is an important one too, because there's a certain kind of osmosis of the faith, right? Like you start embodying rituals and
so
saying
much
the prayers and stuff way before you understand it.
So much of it is caught rather than taught.
And because of that, I think there's a real concern for people who have big justice concerns about their kids. And I've shared it before that like after Alicia and I had Elgin, we just didn't want to go to a church anymore, even though we had worked and been a part of churches where there's a wider spectrum of beliefs on certain issues, because we just didn't want Elgin thinking you debated whether or not you loved your gay church members or that you worked to care for the planet and that kind of stuff. So I think recognizing that is an important question, and taking the time to figure it out so that what gets caught in the faith from your kids is a gift to give them, even if they don't understand why it is. You aren't at one church that they liked going because they had friends there and take the time to get involved in another. Long term, it's a big deal, because like if you're still debating a topic, it's hard to live out of it. And like a lot of deacons that send these type of emails are wanting to live out of these commitments.
And for those of you who for whom this is an issue, it'll be off the front page by the time you hear this, but you can look for a post that went up this week called A Mother's Lament by a friend of mine, Rachel Gibson, who is really struggling with raising her 3 sons in a denominational church where she cannot guarantee that they're not going to be sent the message that there is something wrong with them, that they're not acceptable the way they are, and she's really wrestling with that. So if you want to go and read that and find some resonance there.
And it actually connects a lot to the second letter.
All right, letter number 2.
This one is from a lady, but we won't use names again. Hey, I love what you guys are doing at Homebrewed Christianity. I was raised in a conservative, very Southern Baptist-influenced area in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
That's where the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary is.
Did not know that.
I wanted to ask you some questions, and I hope you will respond. I was wondering what you think of LGBTQ and the church, and if it is possible to be a Christian, LGBTQ Christian, given what it said by Paul about such things. Don't worry, I'm not trying to get you into a debate. I'm trying to understand the parts of the Christian faith that drove me out of the church. I am not gay myself, but I have friends that are, and this question is very hard for me, given the background and theology I was raised in. I mean, we've talked about it some before, and I know that we kind of just assume the answer is yes. So at some point we should just do a longer kind of, if you haven't thought through the issue much before, podcast about kind of sexuality and theology.
Let me just say that you might find a post I put up about a year ago helpful. It was called An Evangelical Defense of Same-Sex Marriage. Now, the unfortunate thing about the title of that article was when I designed it, I thought it would be eye-catching, is that what I end up talking about is actually sexuality, and specifically homosexuality and other issues related to LGBT, but I didn't actually get to the legal defense of same-sex marriage, so that was the one critique people had. But ignore that part. The part you want to focus on in the post is that I deal with Paul's use of certain words and concepts and how they differ from our present understanding and why we need to take those passages in their original context, because here's my take on it, Tripp. I think that the thing Paul is speaking against in the first century is something we would all still find objectionable. And that is not the same thing that we're talking about with sexual orientation and same-sex partnership.
Yeah.
They're two different things, because what Paul is talking about involved a power dynamic at a time where inside they were called the household codes of the Roman Empire, that inside those codes there were certain practices that were employed by the land-owning men who had everyone else, their slaves, the armor bearers, if you will, when they went to war, for the soldiers, and the women, for whom they could do basically what they want when they want, right? There was no legal recourse. There was no protection of individual rights. And so there was a dynamic, a power dynamic within that Paul was addressing. That is not the same thing we're talking about now, because when we use the word homosexuality, that's a brand new word and concept, the way we understand sexual orientation and same-sex partnership, and that needs to be clearly delineated.
Yeah. And so I think there are some real easy answers. I would just say that I think you could go through the clobber passages and reread them and organize them however you want. Most of the time I find people come up with those after they've already changed their mind, right? It's like in this, like I have some gay friends and blah, 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 blah. And the way the question's phrased, right, is, so I like being a Christian. Now, I have this experience where these humans are, I'm told, God sees them this way. That's not how I see them, and I don't see them that way because of something about Jesus. So is there an answer to this question where, God is not a jerk? And so I think a lot of people spend a lot of time arguing about stuff when you change your mind generally on this issue because relationships made you evolve. Anyways,
and because you and I, as some, we're processy, we're into open and relational theology, we think that truth is relational. And so we're not afraid of the fact that people change their mind, like content-wise, information-wise, because of a relational connection. We're okay with that.
Yeah. Secondly, I remember when I was on my way out of Christianity, the one last thing that kept me around for a while was the work of Rob Bell, Shane Claiborne, Brian McLaren, Phyllis Tickle. I read all the material I could that they had written and tried very hard to attend churches with a more emergent thing going on. only to find out that they were part of the Southern Baptist Convention in Acts 29, eventually leaving that to found their own church planting group. I actually felt like I had been had. All the bullshit, hellfire, and damnation preaching I was raised with did not compare to the way I felt when I discovered the church that I had been attending that had embraced spiritual practices, liturgically based worship, and missional living were a Reformed Baptist that taught that gay people basically needed to not be gay and that only men could teach in the church, among other things. I was wondering if you knew of any congregations out this way in Louisville that you would call emergent. There you go. That's another person like the previous one asking the question. I actually have a friend that is at a Baptist church in Louisville, and they started a new kind of emergent worship service. Emily Hull is her name. Anyway, so yes. So I'll have to make sure to connect you on.
So some key words in your Google search as you're looking for a new community that you'll want to look for is go ahead and put in progressive just to see if it pops up, but also open and affirming. That might be what you're looking for. So as you look for, and also new worship expressions, something like that. So you want to avoid words like contemporary or hip. Don't bother with those. What you're looking for is open and affirming or progressive, justice. Put in those words in your search and see what pops up.
I have actually had a couple people, this makes no sense to me, but it kind of does, who are a lesbian couple friend of mine that go to an Acts 29 church and keep their partnership on the DL. That to me makes no sense.
Never
but
heard
it
of
is
anything
connected
like
to
that.
this, like, you have is kind of spiritual practices. The worship aesthetic is one they like. Blah 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 blah. They're doing stuff in the community, and so that to me is just
that's odd. Yeah, but Tripp, here's the thing. I think the
their
elephant in the
comment
room
was all the progressive churches are boring.
Yeah, well, that might be true. That's why you don't want to type in liberal or mainline or right. Like there's certain things that even though they would match you in a justice concern, that the expression may not be what you're looking for as far as what the liturgy looks like. Here's the thing, Tripp. I think the elephant in the room we need to address. So people talk about being a post-denominational era, right, for Christianity, and then other people will object to that by saying, oh, but there's still denominations. You're missing the point. The point is that people do not go to churches where they subscribe hook, line, and sinker to every item on the doctrinal list. People are consumers of religion. We are shoppers, right? It's embedded in everything and in the way we approach it. You and I have both switched denominations. People will do that to locate themselves in a place where they're more comfortable, where it's a better fit. That's what it means to be post-denominational. Not that denominations don't exist, but that people's loyalties are not primarily to denominational expressions.
Yeah. Thirdly, I am struggling to understand my place in the world. Before I read further, I just want... That's a strong sentence. I'm struggling to understand my place in the world. From early on, I thought I was supposed to be a clergyman, but when I discovered that all the churches I attended had an anti-gay, anti-science, anti-women, what I call drunk dad theology, which is where God wants to beat you up and Jesus gets in the way, well, I just could not go in good faith and continue. I was wondering if you had any advice or have known people in my situation. Sorry this message has been so long. Thanks for all you do.
Well, thank you for the note. We do love people's feedback. And, you know, whether it's on Facebook or sometimes direct messages on Twitter or emails or the speak pipe, we get lots of feedback from every week from people who are going through very, very similar things all around the country, sometimes around the world. So just know that this is an issue right now and that you're not alone. And I just want to affirm the stark reality and the weight of if you are somebody who is looking for a community, if this is something you value and prize and in the past has been very influential in the formation of who you are, being without that community can be really not just lonely, but an increasingly weighty, like a millstone around your neck, and it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
If you're built for community and you're out there alone,
Like if you're a human.
yeah, and you're out there alone, that isolation can feel very, very intimidating.
Yeah. And I think in those type of situations, it's important to find a local person or two that you can kind of share that burden together. Mm-hmm. I also think it's important to stay open to an alternative form of community, even if it's just 5 or 6 couples, that you get together with, or close friends that are in school with you, or whatever. Because
if you can find a couple like-minded people to meet at a coffee shop, let me tell you this: my friend Jackie, she's from Central Ohio, she wrote me an email like this a while ago. Because I know her a little bit, we got on the phone together, and I heard her heart for this. It's an almost identical situation, and I just mentioned to her, I'm like, there was an emergent cohort in Columbus. I don't know if they're still meeting, but we Googled it together. She found them. They had actually just met the week before, so she missed a meeting, but she went to the next meeting. She had a phone call with them, and she is prospering in her new connection with this. And I don't know whether she has left her church community that she was so active in, but I do know that she has found some like-minded and close-hearted people that have really encouraged her and that she is participating with now. So it's not undoable.
Yeah. I also hope that people that are listening to this that are in divinity school and stuff and are trying to decide what they're going to do, you're now hearing towns and cities across the nation where you may need to, if you're going to start a church, start a faith community and stuff like that, there is a desire among lots of people for places that are living and life-giving and celebratory type progressive communities where that people don't have spaces in yet. So,
if you're in this situation anywhere you are in the country, I would just say this. If you're in a town as big as Louisville, there is going to be somebody. So whether you find them at the School of Theology or whether they're part of a campus ministry or an emergent expression, you're going to find somebody. Keep looking. You're not alone. They're there. You can find them. It may take some dedicated work.
All right. Number 3, Tripp and Bo. I just have to say thanks. Absolutely love your podcast. You're welcome.
Yep.
It has truly been an inspiration to me these past 6 months, or 9 months. Just to give you a brief background of where I'm coming from, I am a senior at Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, studying Bible and philosophy. It has been a difficult 4 years here in Western Michigan, partially because of rigid Calvinism. In parentheses, I would consider myself to be somewhere between a social Trinitarian Moltmann-yo and an open theist.
Okay, now we're talking.
And also because I am an ethnic minority at a predominantly white school. I could recount horror stories, but maybe I will save those for another time.
Okay.
The best thing educationally and spiritually that has come out of my time here has been relationship discovery with philosophical ethics and liberation theology. While the institution of Cornerstone is fairly conservative, example, we still believe in a literal Adam and Eve and 6 literal day creation, no tobacco, no alcohol, etc., in parentheses. Painful.
Oh, my.
I have found a friend in the philosophy professor here who wrote his dissertation on the Moltmannator.
Oh, we've got nicknames going now.
Oh, yeah. The Moltmannator. Moltmannator. Yeah. Anyway, it has been an uphill struggle, but through these studies, I've come to love and enjoy authors such as Gutierrez, Cohn, West, the Boff brothers, the Brueggemeister, a.k.a. Walter Brueggemann, and many other authors who have helped me not only survive the past 4 years, but have also provided a theological and philosophical platform for me to critique and direct Cornerstone away from oppressive tendencies.
Tripp, before we answer this letter, you have to give us a frame of reference. Tell us why it would be unique in a semi-Calvinist environment. What's the advantage or the appeal of finding a person like Moltmann and social Trinitarian? Just help people who don't know yet why that's big.
Well, one, Moltmann actually is a part of the German Reformed tradition, so he works in the kind of the Reformed categories. Moltmann also takes the notion of divine power and the Trinity and these kinds of things from the Reformed tradition and reworks them in light of a new understanding of divine power through the cross, post-Holocaust, and that kind of thing. So the tradition that Moltmann's inheriting and transforming in light of Moltmann's feminist theologian wife, his liberation theologian students, his experience as a German in World War II, that these transformations that are taking place are coming in the Reformed tradition. So the language and categories that he's working with and transforming are familiar. So
good. So what's a social Trinitarian?
A social Trinitarian is an understanding of the Trinity that is non-hierarchical. In the early church, as they were developing the doctrine of the Trinity, there was a debate as to whether the Father is up on top, and then you get the Son, and then you get the Spirit, and it's a nice little a hierarchy.
Two boys and a bird, we call it.
Yeah, and then or are the three persons in their relationships equal in that the identity of the Son, you can't have a Son without the Father, and you can't have a relationship with the Father and Son without the love that binds, the Spirit. And so when you start to look at that image, all three persons' identities are non-existent without the relations. So intrinsic to all three persons are the social relations that inform them. And Moltmann takes this identity of the Trinity, where all three persons have their identity in the relations, and says that in that space, God evacuates God's self and creates a space within God's self where those relations are not determined, and that is the place where creation's born into being. And so the story from creation to consummation is God coming to indwell in this space that God made. And so the eschatological vision, where God is all in all, is when this space that God receded from and gave an other life, creation. God comes to dwell in that, and creation finds its identity in relationship to the Creator and Consummator, the Redeemer and Sustainer, and that kind of thing. So the social Trinity is a relationship between God. It's also a way of envisioning the movement of redemption and salvation, and that God creates a space for an other to be, and then freely loves that other, becomes vulnerable to it, shares it, but then comes to indwell it, reconcile, and redeem it.
Do I understand that the appeal of such a relational picture of the Trinity is that it gets you out of those dogmatic debates about homoousia, of the same substance, and about hierarchy, gets you away from, say, like the schism in the 1100s between the Eastern Church and the Roman Church about the Son proceeding from the Father, and which direction that went? Is that the advantage, is that you get away from all of that kind of substantial, essential stuff, and you get into a relational understanding?
Yeah, yes, I think here's one of the observations Moltmann makes. The Trinitarian debates were debates when the church was trying to articulate in language the best way of talking about a God who revealed God's self in Christ and is redeeming the world through Christ. That's where the Trinity comes from. Well, when the Trinity debate becomes a debate that then frames the way you understand everything else, and then you turn the Trinity debate into a fight between different Trinities, then you start to miss the point. And so the social Trinity for him, he's saying, well, okay, let's take one step back and realize that the Trinity is the way the church has come to talk about the God who revealed God's self in history and Jesus, this kind of thing. And perhaps the baggage of the debate is more problematic than helpful. So when I interviewed him at the Emergent Conversation, he made a joke that some Christians need the filioque clause.
Interesting.
Because there are certain Pentecostals that probably need the Spirit to actually come through Jesus, because we don't need the Spirit disagreeing with Jesus. And then there's some that just don't need it anymore. They need the Spirit to get a little more lively and get in their midst. And so what he's saying there, right, is that the way we talk about the Trinity is something that should be done to actually inform the very life of the community. That, to me, is...
And if you're listening to this, and this is a brand new kind of idea for you, that there's different takes on the Trinity that are acceptable, right? That this is something you're allowed to kind of look at different pictures of. You may want to also check out, the early churches had an idea called a perichoresis, and so it's peri, like perimeter, and choresis, like choreograph, and it's the dance of God, the life of God around the outside, always leaving that space, that deference to the other. And in that open space was a little bit of Korah imagery.
Yeah. Ooh.
I see what I did
so we
there.
can, and you can go check out the Elizabeth Johnson podcast we just posted on the Barrel Aged podcast stream.
It's been in the cask. It has aged well.
For some reason, Elizabeth Johnson's always good.
Man.
Anyway, our friend here said, I'm currently preparing to make a decision about seminary. I'm trying to decide between Fuller and Northern Seminary in hopes of one day being part of an urban monastic community that participates in political advocacy for minority groups. Public theology is something that I feel has been lost in recent years in no small part to the moral majority. Christianity has indeed been hijacked. Anyways, that's a bit about me. I have a few questions before I say adios. Number 1, what are a few things I should know before going to seminary? Example, what are some central books that I should own or read? How should a first-year act in classroom setting? Is it wise to take what you expect to be your least favorite classes first, etc.? Here's my thought. Anytime anyone asks this question, I always just tell them, well, read what you're passionate about and know that if you ask this question, you're going to do a good job. Right? Like, the students that don't ask this question would be the ones I would say, all right, so it might be important for you to read a book to find out that Moses didn't write the Pentateuch and that you are going to actually have to think critically. And the answer to everything isn't Jesus. But if you ask this question, I don't think you have to worry about it. Because every classroom's different, right? You can see it's pretty easy to figure out what a professor wants. And then just do your best. And you can figure out pretty quickly what ways you experience a class best. I'll say that for me, the key for me was I picked classes based on the professor. Once I knew which professors I enjoyed, I'd take classes I didn't like topics because I want to know who brought the ruckus in the classroom. Right? I'll take a Monica Coleman class about knitting.
In the newspaper.
Because I like taking classes with Monica Coleman kind of thing. Yeah. I took all these science classes with Philip, not because I wasn't even interested in science that much when I started, because I wanted to take a Philip Clayton class. So I'll just say that anyone that's concerned is probably not going to have too much trouble.
You know, true. I like that answer, and what that reminds me of is whenever we get students reading the Bible and they stumble onto that passage about the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit being the unforgivable sin, and they'll come and they'll say, like, I'm really nervous. Like, what if I've committed the unforgivable sin? And it's my great pleasure to say to them, the fact that you're concerned means you haven't committed it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you said that the answer to everything isn't Jesus, it reminds me of a joke. You ready?
Does it involve the Messianic secret?
No, not that joke. That one takes too long and it gets messy at the end. So here's the joke. So the Sunday school teacher has little kids in front of her, and she's trying to get them to like use their mind and participate. And she's talking, and she says, "What's a furry creature?" She's describing, and it eats nuts, and it has a big bushy tail. And every clue she gives, the kids just stare at her, and they're not saying anything. So she finally, like, no one's guessing, and so she finally calls on this little kid, and he says, I don't know, teacher. It sure sounds like a squirrel, but I know the answer is Jesus. Because he was in Sunday school.
I understand.
All right.
I'll say that one thing about seminary is find the people that you can hang out with a couple hours every day and just chat it up. My first year in seminary, I met the Crawdaddy, Chad Crawford, and Corbin Boakhouse and David With. Those are my Wake Forest demon deacons, and the three of us probably smoked cigars and argued about religion and politics 3 times a week. Corbin is doing his PhD in historical theology now at Emory, and when we met, he was carrying in his assault rifles to the Divinity Schoolhouse as a hardcore libertarian from Georgia, and we argued a lot. And I would say, like, and becoming friends with people that are very different than you, but just enjoy and share that passion of thinking critically and passionately about your faith is way better than just hanging out with people who just agree with you. Corbin and I have both changed our minds a lot, and we're still really good friends. And shout out Corbin, because we both had babies less than a week apart. We're going to try to arrange our kids' marriage. And so find the people, because the fun and growth is going to be learning to talk about the ideas with your peers.
So here's what I did, and that I would suggest is listen when your first semester, listen for who asks good questions in class, and then invite them out to coffee. Just go down to the bookstore and have coffee with them. When I got to seminary, I found a collection of conversation partners that were amazing, who I'm still in conversation with. Melissa Marley Bonnickson, Naomi and Don, Luke Sumner, Nate Glancy, Philip Keaton, Brittany, Jen. Like, these were my conversation partners, and I'm still in contact with them because I'm interested in what they're doing. I watch them on Facebook and Twitter. I'll email them. Some of them are going to be on the podcast in an upcoming episode because I love these people.
Number 2, what is a good book to read on atonement theory? I was thinking of Andrew Sung Park's book, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, just do that.
Andrew Sung Park's freaking awesome. He has a book called Triune Atonement that summarizes all the different atonement theories. And then, of course, was it From Wound to Healing or something like that? His big book on his atonement theory.
I would suggest Saved from Sacrifice is one, and also The Nonviolent Atonement. Also,
and a last one I'll put is called Contemporary Christologies by Don Schweitzer. Mm-hmm. It is an introduction to Christology, but it's organized not on how you deal with the historical Jesus, blah, 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 but actually on kind of 20th, 21st century atonement theories. So how would you organize Christologies based on atonement theories?
I would also say Cross and Covenant by Larry Shelton.
Well, there you go. That is a lot of answers. Number 3, what is a good book on open theism? Or more specifically, what is a good book against Calvinism? Roger Olson, he was on the podcast not too long ago, but he has a really cool book on Calvin and Arminian theology and stuff. Give a shout out to Clark Pinnock. His book, The Most Moved Mover. If you're into open theism, it's my favorite of all the kind of open theist books. The Most Moved Mover is, I think, his last full book before he passed, and an excellent book that kind of collects a lot of the insights that kind of evangelical theology movement had. And last is, what are your opinions about the 2 possible seminaries? Don't hold any punches. I eventually want to pursue a PhD in contextual theology or something related to liberation political theology. All I know is, as a homebrew Christianity partner, that we're going to pull for Fuller Theological Seminary because it's nearby. You know who we like hanging out with? Deacons like you. I also know that Fuller has a lot of stuff when it comes to contextual theology. They have a lot of really cool students. L.A. is a great place to come and kind of get involved in different monastic community. They have a really diverse student population that do all kinds of stuff. The frontier in evangelical theology, I think, is at Fuller, and there's tons of Fuller homebrewed Christianity deacons. Anytime we do stuff over there, they all come out. So if you're wanting to show up at a place and know you're going to get to have conversations like the ones we're having here, then go to Fuller because we're here and they're all over the place. And honestly, God's everywhere, so go where the beautiful weather is. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that is a completely reasonable response.
Hey, I decided to call up Micky Jones and get her on the line. Micky, how are you?
I'm doing good. How's it going?
Good. So listen, we're reading letters from listeners tonight, and we are 3 letters in, and we got this one about picking a seminary. And I thought, who better to talk to than somebody who just picked a seminary? So I wanted to get your take. If you have a young person who is looking to kind of broaden their theological perspective, and they're looking to launch out, and they're choosing between, in this case, Northern Seminary and Fuller, like, what advice would you give the person as far as what things to look for or prioritize? Like, what's your experience been? Because I know you are still kind of thinking about going to one closer to your home, but you've decided to do this one across the country that's like a modular style. So, what are your thoughts on picking a seminary?
Well, and this is good thinking for older people too, not just a younger person. I'm one of those older students, maybe. So my program, I'm at George Fox Evangelical Seminary now. And for me, it was not necessarily about comparing a bunch of different programs. I know some people do that, you know. It wasn't about, you know, stacking a bunch of programs together and then saying, well, this one has this and this one has that. But I was looking for specific type things. A really good piece of advice I got was to find professors that you were interested in or you like their work or their writing and find out where they teach. So that was one of the things I did. I actually was exposed to Dr. Randy Woodley on Homebrewed and followed him to George Fox, but also talking to people who had been through the program. And so if you have several schools you're looking at, you know, talk to some of the students. And even now I've just changed programs, and the first thing I did when I was even considering it was to talk to a student who actually blogged about his choice to go from one program to another. So, you know, I think it's really good to actually talk to people. This has to be a personal thing. It's not just about, it's not just about academics. This is a very personal decision, I think, when you're talking about, you know, spiritual training or theological studies. You want to go somewhere that you feel like not just fits you as in already what you already know, or is comfortable denominationally or something like that, but what's going to kind of force you to grow.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, listen, people really like you, and they are interested in your journey, so you're going to have to tell us. You mentioned in passing that you switched programs. So you started out in an MDiv because you want to leave the door open for being ordained, right, down the road.
Sure, yeah.
But you have, after your first semester, as I did after my first semester, you switched programs. So tell us what you were going to and why you made that change.
Yeah, so I changed from MDiv to a master's in intercultural studies, but not just any master's. It's actually also in conjunction with a program called, or an organization called NATES, which is North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies. And most people, when I say that, either don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Or when they figure out that Indigenous means Native American, they're kind of like, Native American and Christian? How does that work? Do they worship trees and the sun? So that's been interesting to explain to people, especially maybe more conservative people. I mean, the first person I told was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't believe in all that Native American stuff about worshiping the things. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't even know what you're talking about. So, you know, I do kind of get a weird kickback from people, or people kind of want to question me about how could it possibly be legitimately Christian. But I'm really, really excited about it because I feel like I've discovered some things about myself, even in this semester, that I just wanted a program that was more open in certain areas, or was doing more looking at Christianity from other perspectives, not just from a traditional perspective or the white male middle class perspective, but was coming from different places. And I feel like that's what this program is going to do.
All right, interesting. So let me ask the stupid question, which is, when you're doing intercultural studies, for you, Micky Jones, what are your intercultures?
The really interesting thing about the way this program is run is because it's in conjunction with NATES, it's primarily Native Americans who are both teaching the program and who are enrolled. So most of my classmates are going to be Native American. I think at this point I'm actually going to be the only African American student. So now that could change, of course, at any time. And there are white students. I think we've got an Asian student coming in. So the other thing is that you are expected to be a co-learner with the instructors and with the other students. So it's not necessarily about sitting at the feet of these great teachers and just absorbing from them, but I'm supposed to be bringing the things I've discovered to the table. So that was really exciting to me, too. Yeah, I think it's a really different type of program, still academically rigorous, maybe even more so in some ways. And so I'm really excited about how that's going to work.
All right, one final question. You've mentioned before that you have kind of this relationship or standing offer, if you will, at a a high-quality PhD program just down the road from you that you could be residential at if you wanted to. And so does this intercultural degree, is that the kind of thing that you could parlay into the kind of PhD you want to?
Well, I hope so. I think it will. I think it's a really good program, and it's what actually I think it will be something that'll, even open more doors as far as further studies. But we'll just have to see. And I've just had so many people tell me, to the point where I'm sick of hearing it, is that it's about the process, and that I need to enjoy the process. So I'm really trying to do that, but I just had to work on a paper, and I had another student read it for me, and he was like, "Don't worry about your grade. That's not important." And I was like, "Oh no, the grade is important." Like, no, it's not the process. Yeah, I'm just like, whatever. So, but it really is. So I am trying to embrace that whole "it's about the process" business, even though I do have my eye on the prize. But you got to just go one step at a time.
All right. Just before I let you go, you're one semester into seminary. What's been your favorite course?
My favorite is my Old Testament, because my Old Testament professor did a whole segment on hip hop and ancient materials. So that's, when you're like listening to Getting Jiggy with It and Puff Daddy, like that's like the fact that he like can relate that to ancient Near East culture, that it was amazing.
Wow, that actually sounds pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it was great.
All right. Well, thanks, Micky. I know it's late out where you are, but I wanted to call you and just check in with you because I thought you might have something to say about picking a seminary.
Yeah, I hope that helps. Hopefully we'll hear from him again.
Oh,
this one's of substance.
Letter number 4.
Look at this, Bo.
What? And that's the snail mail one?
Yeah. That is 3.5 typed pages.
Single spaced.
We're not going to... I don't think we'll read the whole thing.
I don't think we could read the whole thing.
Dear Tripp Fuller.
Dear Tripp Fuller.
2 things on the podcast with Kirk made me think or scratch my head. Then he lists off 3. So he was scratching his head, and then just had to add another one. I will say that the Daniel, Kirk, and I talking at the brewery in Orange County did get quite the response online. Mm-hmm. And he brings up a number of the topics. So we'll talk about them. Number 1, the very endearing story of your father telling you that the virgin birth was a myth. Number 2, your idea about the need for the resurrection and how to convince other Christians of that need who might be skeptical, i.e., about hopeless people without hope, just snuffed out, and how no Christian wants to own that. And those are in parentheses. 3, your discussion of how, as a youth pastor, you deal with the intricacies of the confirmation process. I'll just say a little bit about all 3 real quick. That way, people that didn't listen to the other one...
Yeah, bring them up to speed.
So it's basically, it was a conversation with my dad about the Bible and stuff, and how the virgin birth is not something to, a sword to fall down on. And that's not why you read the Bible, is to find weird things to defend scientifically, which... if you're not a fundamentalist, that's not new news. All right. But Dad has always opened up those kind of critical, open conversations. Anyway, the second one about the resurrection, I don't know if I was trying to convince other people who are skeptical that they need it. I was just saying it's like got to be one of the coolest ideas ever. So just
why not?
Why not? Yeah. And now personally, like I know you postmodern people, Bo, and
guilty.
You're not real interested in me going on about trying to demonstrate that. I like its probability historically and things like that.
No, that's not my concern.
It's just not interesting to people. But
I do like its performative work in the life of the believer.
But all I was saying is that the resurrection is like our most interesting thing. As Christians,
I would say one of our more interesting things.
All the other ones come out because people believed in the resurrection. The rest, Jesus' teachings, other people taught those kind of things. Other people believed in God, all that kind of stuff. Now, resurrection, you got a Jewish apocalyptic rupturous event with a foretaste of the consummation. Yeah. That is exciting.
See, I would say that there are certain seeds you can eat And there are other seeds you put in the ground, and you have to wait for them to become something, what they're going to be, and then enjoy them.
Okay.
And I would put the resurrection maybe in that second category, that the fruit that it ends up bearing is way better than the seed itself. Ruptures new life? Are you kidding me?
Oh,
Well, look,
you're a liberal. All right. But my point in the conversation with Daniel was that we were talking about this YouTube comedy post where an African American comedian was just like, "Well, I'm black. I don't get to not believe in the resurrection," or something like that.
That was funny. I saw that.
And we were talking about it, but my whole point was, without the resurrection, then there's a lot God has left to answer for.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And
my only point is I don't want to fight about the resurrection. I want to see what resurrection does.
well, I get that, but the resurrection, I don't think you're talking about like the resurrection. And this is in the first paragraph. He says, "Yeah, I'm not a Christian, though I'm obviously interested, because why would I be listening to your podcast?"
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And so the bit about the resurrection really doesn't work for me. I'm not in the business of believing in hope, in other words, and so relative snuffing seems unfortunate but inevitable. Setting aside political and moral questions of mitigating it, obviously, one way of mitigating it is to offer the hope of resurrection, but then that is not a tool in my toolbox. So this is to him and to you, Bo. The resurrection is not about coming up with a tool in a toolbox to give hope. The resurrection, in Christian theology, historically, is about the identity of God. The cross and the resurrection are about the identity of God. They are a special revelation about the identity of God. God is the one who dies cross dead, and God is the one who gives future to the cross dead one. That the resurrection, why I was saying this and why it's important is, if God, if Christian, if you abandon the notion that God, that the cross dead Christ has a future in God, if you abandon that notion, then you no longer have God telling us who God is by giving a future to the one who dies alone on the cross. And so the resurrection isn't about, let's have new life in our stuff. That's second tier conversation. The resurrection is precisely about the one who can give new life to us at the end of death, beyond the curse of sin and law and all that other kind of stuff. The resurrection is about God's identity. God is the one who knows, cares, bears, and transforms all the shit we carry.
I would agree with 90% of that. Okay,
well, then you're 90% correct.
Here's an important thing that people may not understand. So this summer, I found out that a lot of people think that we are one person. We just get smashed in and assimilated, and we're called like, well, it's mostly Tripp, but they mean Tripp and Bo, but sometimes they just say homebrewed, and they mean whatever you and I, the two-headed monster, are. That's what they mean.
Our perichoresis.
So here's the thing. One important distinction people need to know is that while Tripp and I, as a Venn diagram, have a lot of overlap, there is a significant distinction, which is the fact that I'm friends with Al and Tripp is friends with thee. Here's how that plays out. Tripp talks about the incarnation and the resurrection. I am more concerned with being incarnational and resurrection. I'm not concerned about these, so not primarily. I'm concerned about resurrection and incarnation, being incarnational. Tripp hates Al, and he wants to talk about the right event.
Because theology is actually about God.
So can I just say how important this is? When we read somebody like Moltmann, who we referenced earlier, who says that the crucifixion,
he's agreeing with me.
Not crucifixion, the crucifixion, is an event between God and God's self. Someone would have no capacity to understand that unless they understood the depth of meaning, the layers and layers, the overflow. Can I even say in a hyper-theist way?
Yes.
The overflow of meaning in both incarnation and resurrection, crucifixion, these as concepts and performative language in the Christian tradition, they do something. Now, I'm willing to talk about the historicity, if you will, about the events of the incarnation and the resurrection, but they're not my primary concern. As a practical theologian, my primary concern is how resurrection functions, how incarnation, right, is embodied in Christ. That's my primary concern. So that's a little difference between Tripp and I.
Well, okay. So Bo's egging me on. And here's the thing. My only point when talking to Daniel Kirk is that the resurrection, as Christians, historically, is the place where we find where God tells us who God is. And the resurrection is the place in which the entire story from Abraham on, the story of Israel, the prophets, and David, and Miriam, and all these kinds of things, they bear their fruit in the life of this prophetic Jew. And through the resurrection, we come to see that one person's fully faithful life is the image of the invisible God. That one person's embrace of the other, and all these other kinds of things, are not just ideas or assertions or attempts at getting at who God is. That God was getting God's self said in that life, or revealed in that life, and that the resurrection is not just about the future of Jesus, it's about the future of all of us. Because the resurrection is not some abstract concept, it's a Jewish apocalyptic concept. So when Paul's talking about first fruits and all these other kinds of things, what Paul's trying to say is like, yeah, we know about the resurrection of the dead, we've talked about that because I'm a good Jew. But the thing is, it happened here and it's not done yet. And so what we get here is the first fruits, the taste. We get to see the good news, the gift of God that's coming to all creation, when God's all in all. And so the resurrection is what makes us practicing resurrection possible. Otherwise, as Paul said, then we're wasting our time.
So I agree with 90% of what you said. Here's what I'm more
the
concerned with.
incarnation means that the idea of God being with us and stuff isn't some nice Feuerbachian way of motivating good behavior.
Agreed.
But actual divine investment and participation in our existence.
I agree. I said I agree with 90%. Here's where my little variation is. What I'm concerned with is the power in the seed of that story. So the kirgama, the proclamation, and the performative register of the community of God living out that life that is held in the seed of that event.
Yeah, and I'll just say that the living out of it, no matter if you're freaking Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa, when you compare it to the eschatological banquet, the resurrection is going to make a lot bigger deal than whatever practiced resurrection you have in the meantime. Because that's going to be the place in which the place in which the identity of God is ever confirmed as the one who.
I totally agree. And I would say simply, just add a little bit. Like I said, 90%. I'm with you 90%. Here's the other thing. Perhaps. Because what if resurrection in its very core is so powerful as a concept and an embodied practice, that this notion of rupture of new life, that it contains, it's like a self-watering seed. It contains its own life.
Resurrection is an activity God does.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yes. See, we agree on a lot. Venn diagram, lots of overlap.
Well, that first half of that was... But here's why, because as the author of this letter goes on, he keeps saying, redemption seems central to you. That's why when I say all the stuff about the resurrection, I'm talking about God. This is a lot because I'm a realist about human beings. All you like Anabaptists, hippie Christians are all thinking that someday we're just going to have like peace, love, and harmony and junk like that. And I just think you're overly optimistic about.
Yeah, you need to revisit your anthropology.
And
I'm not saying go Calvinist on that.
No,
I'm just saying
that part of the human predicament is a brokenness that we're never going to incarnate the answer to or resurrect the hope to. God incarnates God's self. God resurrects things. We're a part of it. We can be claimed by it. We can be taken up into it. But the incarnation and the resurrection are where we discover as finite human beings that God is for us. Revelation is where we understand and experience God as for us. It's called being a Protestant. I don't know why this is new news, but Protestantism does theology, and it centers itself when God demonstrates who God is for us.
No, of course I agree with that.
I know. I'm just saying that missional, incarnational, practicing resurrection, love all that stuff. Thing is, those are outworkings of who God is.
Agreed.
And who God tells us who God is.
Which is why I don't want to argue about thee. I want to do the al.
I think that I agree. I'm not saying not to practice things, Bo. I'm just saying that sometimes people get all Al-y.
Yeah.
And if you're hanging out with Al and then everyone else leaves the room, if thee leaves the room and Al's the only one there,
so
that's not news to me.
This is a both and situation?
Oh, my God. All right. What I'm trying to do for the author of the letter is preform the questions.
I may have lost the plot.
No, you're doing a great
Okay,
job
good.
because you're making me get more aggressive, which I hope ends up clarifying the questions. And we had tons of people talk about. We had a couple calls about that episode, too.
Oh,
we'll do them next time on
Okay.
TNT. So the author goes on and talking about this notion of redemption and the story I told, and it goes to the heart of what it means to be a human being. He says, and yet that story rings false to me for a number of reasons, but chiefly because it's about those humans again. In other words, it's about some kind of relationship between God and people, between the divine and human. Those categories don't make much sense to me. What makes us human is the fact that we are not animals. And the difference has been manifested for quite a long time in the idea or belief that human is linked to the divine, and that there's a story, a narrative about this important and singular relationship between the human and the divine. The other animals are neither here nor there. In other words, the idea that humans are somehow different and special or privy or subject to redemption seems unlikely to me, given Darwin and subsequent discoveries that suggest human beings are pretty much just chimps.
Wait a minute. Except for that last part about the chimps. So if you just said the thing about, of course humans aren't the only ones who are privileged for salvation and redemption. Tripp, can I just say duh?
No, but this is important. Scripture has no interest in just saving human beings.
No.
The whole story is about creation.
Right.
The
See, now we're
identity
back
of
into
God,
overlap.
God as creator, redeemer, sustainer,
Yeah.
consummator, means God's identity is in jeopardy with all of creation.
Look, John 3:16 says God so loved the world.
Yeah.
In Greek, cosmos.
I imagine
right?
that our author of this letter here, all three of us agree. If you do Christian theology that doesn't care about all living things, that Noah covenant with all living things, and everything God made that is deemed good, if we're not responsible as the proud chimps that we are, one of the lines I thought was pretty funny, proud chimps we are, we're aware of it. If we're not responsible for all living things, then you have sucky theology.
You know what people don't know that really makes me angry? Now I'm going to go on a tear.
no.
You ready?
I am ready.
Cartesian dualism. So Rene Descartes,
Correct?
he had this
Philosopher.
little... Yes, he's a philosopher. And he has had such a profound impact on Christians in the last 2 centuries. Wow, that plane is loud. And Christians in the last 2 centuries. And most people don't even know that they've inherited a Cartesian dualism. But when you separate out the animals on the planet from humans and think that salvation, right, is something that humans get, and maybe even in the afterlife, but that it doesn't touch the rest of creation, you have thoughtlessly been acted upon by an idea that you may not even realize it's the water we swim in. And people don't know that how deeply they've been affected by this split, and that the way we view humans versus other animals. I don't know if you've noticed, Tripp, humans have nipples and belly buttons.
Correct.
That means we're mammals, baby. And if you look at our breeding
I like
habits,
when you call me baby.
if you look at our breeding habits, our mating habits, our eating habits, right, our sleeping, how we nurse our young, we're mammals.
We're pretty much chimps.
So, so why in the world would salvation come to clever chimps? I mean, you're hairy as heck, man. Right?
True that.
You clearly There's something going on with you.
At 30, I started growing back hair. What's that about?
So here's the thing. This Cartesian dualism is so ubiquitous and has sunk in at so many levels of culture that people don't even know what it is, but they think in it. It is their operating system.
Yes. So if as our author of the letter is very concerned about, if salvation or redemption is just a story about between God and man, and he put man, not me, I'm not going to do such a thing. But
we would say human.
But people that are obsessed with God and man probably just put man.
What about human?
Human. Anyway, if that's the only categories for the story of redemption, then it's not good enough.
God, man, what a terrible story.
And he says, it seems like
it's good on one level.
It seems like a story that's not worth telling. I agree. He put it bluntly. I'm he's going to have to write back or call into the speak pipe, please, because I want to know how you feel about us expounding on this, because I had quite a bit of fun with the letter. Anyway,
people also may be interested to know that in 2014, Tripp and I are going to have a little live showski with one Mr. Sam Harris. Not a Christian.
No, he's not.
Not a fan of Christians.
But by the end of the night.
Honestly, we have Sam Harris has agreed to do a fundraiser with us
for science education.
Yes,
in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, and he's going to do it. And that I don't even know what that event's going to look like. But
if you're listening to this podcast, and here's the thing: if you have thinking of Sam Harris on Homebrew Christianity, if you have a beer style and name that would go well for the night, you should go ahead and send it to us. We got to work on.
We got to package this thing because we have to raise money.
We're going to raise money for science education in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles,
because as Christians, we are not intimidated by any truth.
And that's Sam's condition for coming on is he doesn't want it to benefit us. He wants it to benefit the kids.
Yeah. And I think that's great.
We're into it.
Because you know what? Jesus said, let the little children come unto me.
Oh, snap. It just got biblical.
and little did they know.
That was an Al, biblical Al.
It got biblical Al. Anyway, but here's a question. Because he goes on to kind of talk about the notion of the inheritance of tradition. And he kind of... it's actually a really beautiful letter. If you were the one that wrote this and are okay with us sharing the whole thing, I would love to put it up, because you've listened to a lot of podcasts, thought about it a lot.
There's no way I can format 3.5 pages of single spaced.
We'll put it where you on the podcast. We'll put it up where you could just download the PDF.
But wouldn't you think this would be funny if I formatted it as a blog?
It would be 5 blogs, but still. Because I only have a paper copy, so you'd have to email us the text, or we'd have to scan it. Anyway, I'm just saying it's a really good paper. And he said, so he asks, it's a problem of the context in which you generally speak and perhaps think. This is what he's wondering about this. We sit in this kind of inherited position. So then, conclusion, we've skipped a lot of time where he clearly demonstrates he listens, cares, is interested, enjoys the podcast, and has this question. Here's the question, Bo. And you know me, so maybe you could answer this better than me, because it has a lot. It's hard for me.
I don't know,
because it involves me and Philip Clayton and our personal stories. And I
have enough trouble just thinking for myself, let alone putting myself in your shoes.
Well, look, so I'll try. Okay, but right before that, he then said something about confirmation. I try to talk people out of confirmation.
I have confirmation.
Yeah, I try to talk them out of becoming Christians. I talked 2 out this year.
Yeah, I do the opposite.
Well,
I do the sales pitch.
Well, Well, it's okay. I'm not judging you on the outside. Anyway, so he said that, and he thought it was really cool. I'm insisting that they are critical and ask questions and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, here's the question. Is it a problem that there is a loose community of believers, such as those associated with Homebrew, that seem to be trying as best they can to bolster beliefs, adding here, subtracting there, and they've either been handed down to them, or to which they were exposed and then subsequently took on as adolescents, like Phil? Is that putting it too crudely? Your thinking and the podcast I listen to are utterly intriguing in the complexity of ideas, your ability to work within a tradition and extend it in compelling ways, but compelling to whom? Do you ever worry that you're working within a framework or a box, or that your purpose is too closely tied to nourishing something, a story about redemption, about being human, that seems always susceptible in mild peril, and to bolster others to nourish them who find themselves in your same situation? Insiders talking to insiders. But what about those who don't have this purpose, this need?
Oh, my goodness. There's so much to think about there. So can I just throw some spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks? Number one, it's really interesting that you would say this loose-knit community because, and I will agree with you at one level, is that the camaraderie that homebrew fosters and the like-mindedness and devotion that we have found amongst our deacons and our friends and our conversation partners, it really is unique. So in one sense, I understand why you would say that. But here's the thing. It's not exactly an organized group. Like, this is when people talk about organized religion, we always joke about disorganized religion. In the same way, I would say that what we have here is a self-selecting minority who is participating in their regional, local communities, but has found a commonality through the internet. So that's not exactly the same kind of community or like-minded group, because all of these people are living out the life of faith where they are. And what we have done is basically electronically connected to encourage each other and to challenge each other and to inspire each other to a greater level of faith and fidelity. But it's a self-selecting group, and we're only connected through electronics. It's not, I just would say, don't think that it's too close of a community or close-knit. Like, there's not that much like-mindedness, so that's my first thing.
Because our author can be a deacon as well.
That's true. But here's the second thing. When we put out, not everybody who we interview do we agree with. I have to keep saying this because we came under a little criticism this summer because we're friends with John Caputo, we're friends with Peter Rollins, we're friends with Robbins and Crockett, who put out the New Materialism, and it seemed like we were, part of some band or something.
Radical.
Good one. But here's the thing. If you listened last week, you heard an intelligent design, like a Cambridge physicist. Is he a physicist?
He's like a philosopher of science.
Cambridge trained, intelligent design guy. And we got a lot of blowback. People were just saying, like, how could you even have that guy on the podcast? Why are you even giving a platform to this pseudoscience BS?
And P. Rollins has already told him that, like, evangelism is to go get converted by someone else.
Oh, snap.
So now, if you complained, you have to listen to it and try to be one.
So we've had on everybody from Pentecostal preachers like Mike Williams, right, and faith healers
like Bo.
All the way to this present week. If you go to the website, Grace Ji-sun Kim is talking about Korean feminist eco-theology, Han, post-colonialism. We have everybody. Elizabeth Johnson is the barrel-aged
and Zach
podcast
Lind
right
is
now.
Coming on.
Zach Lind, the rocker for Jimmy Eat World. I mean, we have everybody who, like our conversation partners on. So I would just put up a little bit of a protest, if I can, to say, it's not as tight as you think it is.
But here's the thing. What holds it together generally is I have been told by some of our deacons who don't share the Venn diagram of Bo and I's shared sensibilities. Bo and I would see God is primarily love. That there's a real God who does real things in a real world.
I read that.
That the world is open and relational, those kind of things. And we're both tend to be Christocentric style Christians. We're not one that just talks about God or just talks about the Spirit to avoid talking about Jesus. And we are progressive on a lot of kind of social things. But there's other things that Bo has highlighted in this conversation that we don't agree on yet until I witness to him. But
I need to say one last thing. You go ahead.
No, all I was saying is that so when we talk to different people, a lot of the questions and the ways we ask it come from the place of our overlap. So in that sense, it kind of shares it. And those who enjoy listening are probably ones that have some connection to different things we agree with or like or resonate with, who want to hear the questions they would be asking asked.
The last thing I would say is that you have to really understand that the only thing that Tripp and I are literalist about in the entire thing is the title of the show.
Oh.
Homebrewed Christianity. So nothing else are we literalist about. But this one thing we are, which is this, the analogy. We give you the ingredients. We're trying to provide ingredients for you to mix in with your local expression, where you are, your regional affiliation, to brew your own faith with your own community in your own place. And we're just providing ingredients. We think that if you listen for a certain amount of time, that you'll get a diversity enough that you'll sort out the things that apply. So we're not doing the thing where everyone has to read from the same script. We're not all on the page at the same time. We're brewing. It's a mix of ingredients. It's a process.
The two things I thought in relation to the question, one, this loose community of believers and that kind of thing who are dealing with thoughts in things that are handed down or that they're exposed to and then pick up, that isn't Christian. That's being human. Like, humanity is precisely human because we inherit things. Social evolution, community identity, things inherited through language. We tell stories, and that the stories and all that kind of stuff make meaning and purpose and stuff out of things. Like, to be human is to inherit from your past, from your people, from your community, ways at getting at the world and the existence, the questions that we're thrown in the world. And we have these questions about life, meaning, death, and all that kind of stuff. And we don't ask them alone, and the questions have been asked before us. And as we learn to speak and talk and be human and think, we do it in communities. So we all inherit communities and pick up new communities or change our ideas and stuff. And the author mentions science a couple times in it. And I'll just say that science knows this happens, right? Like, you as a scientist don't look at Newton and go, you know what? Newton's an idiot because he was wrong. He should check his quantum physics facts. No. Newton, yes, was wrong in a lot of places and was right and is still right in a lot of places as we understand it now. But he was part of this critical thinking, scientific quest. And there's nothing anti-scientific, or you're not abandoning the tradition of Newton to then disagree with him. Mm-hmm. You're actually doing it better.
Interesting.
And so I just think that that even that scientific tradition is demonstrating us what is it like to be people in pursuit of truth in community. And when it gets out of stuff you put under microscopes and doing math equations, it gets a lot more complicated. But I think that Christianity, like science, should be a community that constantly is transforming itself in its pursuit of truth, because truth is what we're in pursuit of. And you're not being unfaithful to Paul if you read Romans 1 and go, let me tell you, Paul, you know that whole bit about the male prostitute thing? It might be good for if you had clarified this. I know you could not imagine the idea of committed monogamous homosexual relationships that testify to covenantal love through their living and outworking in community, but it does happen later. So there's nothing un-Pauline about being faithful in the present. So to be human is to be in community, to ask questions and deal with stuff. Last thing, tradition is an asset. It's not a burden. Tradition. He keeps saying it as if tradition is a burden. And in a lot of the other emails and letters that we read, there are parts of tradition that are real burdensome to people, and they're trying to work through them and deal with them. And he even points out, like, oh, y'all are really smart and can work these different things around different ideas and include it, blah, 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 blah. I just say tradition isn't a burden. It's actually an asset. There's a certain hubris in the West that we can all of a sudden be at a place that we can understand ourselves, place in the world, culture, own power and relationships and all that kind of stuff, and that we can do it without the gift of the inheritance of our past and our traditions. The church is inheritance from the Jewish story, from Greek philosophy. We have those inheritance in our actually early church and our thoughts and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think traditions are burdens, but assets. It's like if all we're trying to do is deal with what's on the present, it's like we're running around with buckets collecting fresh rainwater to drink. When a tradition's sitting there with this giant well And if you just learn how to drop the bucket down through the tradition, you can pull up this huge resource of wonderful drinking water. But you just have to learn how to do it. And if you're a Christian, which as our authors says he's an outsider, the tradition of the church, Christianity and stuff, that history of that tradition isn't just a human history. It's also the one where God revealed God's self. I'm not saying God didn't in others. I don't even know how to talk about that. In a sense, like, I'm not going to judge anything else. I'm just saying
how would we?
That I've come to know God as having revealed God's self in the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Good.
And so that history and tradition and all that kind of stuff is not just a history. It is one that to not put the barrel or put the bucket down that well is to actually miss out on something that's essential to living, not like these stories I happen to do nifty philosophical tricks to.
This has been the Theology Nerd Throwdown. We thank you for all of your feedback. We love your notes. Send us emails. Send us direct messages. Facebook us. Call into the speak pipe. We love it all. Please, we have 2 favors to ask as we close. Number 1.
Only 2.
Don't forget to share the brew.
Oh, yeah, share it.
Yeah. And secondly, let us know what you want us to talk about on these Theology Nerd Throwdowns, because Tripp and I can talk about anything under the sun because we both, this is all we do all week.
And we're friends and like talking to each other.
Yeah, and we only have the record button pressed 1 hour a week. But we do this all the time. So let us know if you're interested in something. Hey, Tripp, I wanted to run something past you in closing.
Oh.
So I'm always looking for new taglines for our podcast.
Oh.
So I want to run one past you after that 4th note today.
Okay.
Homebrew Christianity, putting the nominal back in denominational.
That'll work for 3 people. All right. Anyway, thank you for all 4 of our letter writers. Holler back at us on the speak pipe if we read your letter. Also, if we read your letter, we didn't use your names and stuff. But if you tweet or email me, I'll send you the Nerd Out with Your Geek Out sticker because you have contributed to the Theology Nerd Throwdown. All right, Deacons, this is Tripp from the Homebrewed Christianity headquarters in Redondo Beach.
And this is Bo on his way back to the west side.
All right, saying peace out and brew on.